The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Andrea McMaster.
Hello everyone, I'm Andrea McMaster and thank you for joining us for this edition of Consider This. Most women know what makes their partners, their children, their friends happy, but when it comes to figuring out what lights up their own lives, well, many women don't have a clue. That is the focus of this book, What Happy Women Know: How New Findings in Positive Psychology Can Change Women's Lives for the Better. One of the authors, Dr. Dan Baker, resides in Lincoln, Nebraska, and he is with us today. We're glad to have you with us, Dr. Baker, medical psychologist, dedicated to the study of human behavior. And he is the founding director also, I have to mention, of the award-winning Canyon Ranch's Life Enhancement Program in Tucson, Arizona.
That's correct.
So glad to have you with us. Now, I know we're talking about this book as being a male author of a book about happy women. You have two female authors along with you as well, because people probably wonder, how can we pick up a book that a man wrote about women being happy?
that did pose a bit of a question when I started out putting this manuscript together, so I enlisted the very capable help of my business partner, who is a social biologist, a PhD in social biology, which very much contributed. And then the other writer, a woman who has written no less than 11 books on women's health. So I was in good company, Andrea.
Okay. Well, talk to a little bit in a couple of sentences. We're going to go very in depth in highlighting some of the issues that you go through in the chapters in your book. But I want you, in just a couple of sentences, what makes a woman happy?
I think really understanding how much power she actually has and using that power not only to make others' lives better, but to make her own life better.
And talking about women don't have a clue of what makes themselves happier, it's easy for us, I think, to point out the good in other people's lives and how they have it, but when you ask about the good in themselves, a lot of people don't have a clue. Why is that the case?
I think that if you look at, for both biological, neurological, and cultural reasons, women get more points, if you will. They have a greater sense of achievement when they attend to others. And men don't operate the same way. When I wrote the first book, What Happy People Know, and it was published in 2002, I said I think fear gets in the way of happiness for many people. And we went through a number of different scenarios around that, but categorically there are two huge umbrellas, if you will, under which fear falls. And one is fear of not having enough, and the other is fear of not being enough. And I got to thinking about that, and it occurred to me that many of the men I interacted with, they fell more into the first category, fear of not having enough, getting that promotion, getting that job, getting their business started, getting the corner office in the high rise. Women, on the other hand, when they came to talk to me, talked a whole lot more about relationships. And if you're afraid you're not enough, and you're dependent on other people to give you that feedback, and they either give it to you ineffectively or they don't give it to you, then you're vulnerable in that way. And so I thought, well, coupled with all the new research coming out about how women do differ from men and my professional experience, this book needs to be written.
In your book, you highlight positive psychology, which might be new for a lot of people hearing that term. It's an alternative to clinical psychology. So talk about what positive psychology is.
Positive psychology is the study of strengths, virtues, character, values. In short, it's the study of what's right with humanity and with their organizations and with their institutions. I'm a very fortunate fellow, Andrea. I get to go look at what's right in people. The interesting thing about what's right has been dismissed. In other words, when you do something well at work, well, that's the way it should work. But if you do something wrong at work, well, we're going to have this committee and we're going to study it and we're going to have recommendations and we're going to get solutions. The point is, we tend to focus far more extensively on what we do wrong. And I'm trying to bring a consciousness to people. Focus on what you do right, use that as your foundation, build from it, and you're going to find a much better life as a result.
And key in your book, throughout the whole book, is you can influence your own happiness, no matter what cards are dealt you. Now I know, granted, some people have easier lives than others. It might just be because of their family, their finances, whatnot. But everybody has that chance in influencing their own happiness?
There's actually been some research, because invariably a question comes up, well, how much do genetics determine or predispose somebody to happiness? Well, we now have a benchmark. It's around 50%. 10% comes from events. You go home and you find you win the lottery today, at least for a moment you're going to be euphoric. Now that may not be the best thing in the long run, because we've studied those people and they don't end up being happy people on the whole. But 40% of what we experience in terms of mood is intentional. And that's a great amount, that gives us a great deal of power. If I had 40% chance in Vegas, Andrea, and I'm not a betting person, but if I had a 40% chance of winning, I'd probably be there most weekends.
You talk about happiness traps, and I'm going to go through a list of the 6 happiness traps here, and then we'll key in on each one and go more in depth. But your book lists 6 happiness traps, and I'm going to here give you the list. Perfectionism, the first one. Wanton wanting. People pleasing. Revenge. Thinking that you are nothing without him. Circling the career track. So these are happiness traps that women can fall into. Let's begin with the first one, perfectionism.
Right.
There are joys to getting it wrong. Failure can be a teacher and a source of personal growth. So many women, a lot of my girlfriends that I know are perfectionists, have a hard time delegating to others,
Sure.
be it a family member or a spouse. Why can this be a happiness trap?
Because it really doesn't deliver what it promises. If you could become perfect, Andrea, you'd never make a mistake. You would not only be able to spend 10 hours a day with your kids, you could also be in national TV, the prominent anchor woman, or whatever, that people have dreams about, and you would be happily married, and your husband would be very understanding, and all of these kind of things. And yet, you can't, in terms of reality, when you look at perfectionism as kind of an obsessive compulsive phenomena, you can't get there from here. You can incrementally improve, and this is the antidote to it. How do I become better today than I was yesterday? How do I become a little wiser, more resilient, kinder, more patient, etc.? And so perfectionism in our culture, and particularly around appearance, if you look at the multi-billion dollar industry, the cosmetic industry is, if you look at how many women, men are now going to cosmetic surgeons too, but the ratio of females to males far outweighs the number of men going there.
So what do happy women know about perfectionism?
Okay. They know you can't get there from here, and they know that it's that small, continual step toward improvement in life, creating a better life. It's not the big things, Andrea. It's the multitude, the accumulative effect of small things that are important.
And what I liked was happy women know that admitting a problem exists is the first step towards changing it.
Absolutely. All constructive change requires awareness as the first step. If you don't have a clue, you're not likely to make the change.
Wanton wanting.
Okay. Wanting. Crazy making wanting. If you're 5'6" and you want to be 5'10", that's not going to happen. If you want to have a certain bone structure, that's not going to happen. Women make themselves crazy about wanting something different. In fact, this is a side trap they fall into, is comparison. Women compare themselves to other women far more than men compare themselves to men. If you go to a gymnastics class, who's wearing the latest clothes? Who keeps up with the instructor better? Who's better than the instructor? And how do I fare in regard to that person? And when we pick somebody to make comparison, particularly when women pick somebody, they seldom win. They almost always lose. It's not a great way to start your day.
So what do happy women know then?
Happy women really do that old thing, counting their blessings. What happens, Andrew, if you get up in the morning, and take me literally, black and white, and you think about all the people you love before you put your feet on the floor that morning? What happens when you're going off to work and you think about all the good things that could happen at work? I like what you're doing right now. What happens when you think about leaving work? You've accomplished something of importance, you've contributed to your company or the university or the community or all the above. What happens when you go home and you see your children and you have time with your husband, and when you put your head on the pillow tonight, you have a sense of appreciation for what you've experienced this day? Mm-hmm. Happy women understand that.
It does seem. Why is it that the more we get, it seems like the more we need to really boost our happiness level? So we move into a house that we're just joyful to actually own a home. We've been renting an apartment.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we want a larger home. We want the home that our friend has down the street.
Because there's something called accommodation theory, and it says that no matter what level we achieve, that we always see the next horizon. I can remember when I started working at the medical school a number of years ago.
Here in Nebraska, by the way.
Here in Nebraska, yes, here in Omaha. It was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But what I was paid annually, I get paid for in 1 hour presentation today. But when I came out of graduate school, it seemed like the world. It seemed like, this is a lot of money. Today, somebody offered me that for an annual salary, I'd say, I'm not quite ready to go that altruistic in life. So things change, and so we accommodate. We get a new house, we want a newer house or a bigger house. We get a car, it's only good for 3 years, not 10 years, and so it goes. And again, this is what Madison Avenue counts on. The Madison Avenue mantra is happiness is in your next purchase. And that's a really interesting concept if you think about it, because you can't get there.
Mm-hmm. And the key here, happy women don't play the comparison game because they know that there will always be someone else who will have more than they do.
Precisely. But I have sit down with a lot of those women that many women would say they have more than I do. And I've seen their tears, and I've heard their stories, and I've understood their pain. And acquisition of material goods, sometimes that's even a trap. When I talk to a woman who owns 6 homes with her husband, you say, wow, 6 homes. Well, I've got my winter home, my summer home, my spring home, my in-between homes. Point is, those properties ended up driving them. They had, so-and-so the gardener quit. Now I've got to find a new gardener. Oh, we have a problem with the roof. I've got to fly down there to see it. And so when we think, well, boy, wouldn't it be great to have that kind of life? When you sit down and you listen to those people, you really question who's managing what here. Are the things possessing them, or do they possess the things? And it's a very fine line sometimes.
Okay, people pleasing.
Okay.
Of course women do this because women are the caregivers. Women are always looking at other individuals in their lives. That's just part of our nature and part of our role as women.
Right.
But what's the dangers of people pleasing too much?
Losing yourself. There was a great rabbi by the name of Hillel, and he's known for 3 questions. Hillel lived about 2,000 years ago. And the first question, if I am not for me, then what am I? Now, when I say that to women, a lot of times they think I'm talking about becoming selfish. And that's not what he's talking about at all. He's talking about self-interest. Andrea, there are some things only you can do for you. In other words, nobody can move your body for you. If you're going to exercise and take care of your body, it's up to you. Nobody can determine how you nourish yourself but you. If I said to you, Andrea, you're responsible for your behavior as a healthy adult human being, would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
If I said to you, Andrea, you're a very intelligent woman, and the truth is nobody can think for you. You're going to sort out things. You read this book, you say, I like that, I don't agree with that, whatever. The third thing is important is, if you're responsible for your behavior and you're responsible for your thoughts, be responsible for your emotions, because that empowers you in a way that nothing else can. So if I'm dependent on you liking what I'm saying, and you don't, I'm going to have a very bad day.
Because that's not always going to happen. And I think also key here is people pleasers say yes way too often. So having the power to say no. I liked that in just one of the tools that you gave is before responding to someone's request, buy yourself some time to think about it. So say, well, I'm going to check my calendar and then get back to you. So then you can really think it over before you're saying yes to too many things.
Exactly, because how do you manage your priorities in your day? Everybody has 24 hours. People say, I don't have enough time, but that's not absolutely true. What's really true is, what are our priorities? And if I'm saying yes to everything, I don't have priorities. And if I don't have priorities, I don't have a sense of direction, I don't have a sense of purpose, I don't have a sense of meaning in life, at least not a well-defined one.
Okay, the 4th happiness trap, revenge. What I liked about what you said here is that it is normal to feel this way, because I think a lot of us say, oh my goodness, I'm feeling revengeful thoughts against this person, and oh, that's evil, that's bad,
Right.
That's nasty. But how you act is the key. it's normal maybe to have those original thoughts, but how you act is key. So talk a little bit about revenge.
Okay. This came home, and the reason I attributed this more to women, over the course of my practice, I heard far more stories about my cheating, lying, thieving husband. Well, when did this happen? And I was thinking, you know, we'll get an answer of a couple of months maybe, or within the last year. And that happens sometimes. But what really, a lot of times, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, I'm saying, wow, and you're still hanging on to this. One of the things that's important to understand is Kurt Lewin, a psychologist very prominent in the 50s and 60s, said human emotions are energy. And when we talk about positive and negative emotions, if you think about positive emotions create energy. They energize us. When you think about going to a family gathering and all the people you're going to see that you love dearly, you're energized. Negative emotions actually take away energy. When you're angry with somebody, and if you stay angry with somebody, pretty much that's all you think about. It closes out your perceptions to anything else happening around you that could be beneficial to you. And so as a consequence, we really need to understand that yes, I'm going to be reactive. If I'm hurt, if I'm betrayed, I'm going to be reactive. The question is, how do I move on from that? And in part, it's forgiveness. What most people don't understand about forgiveness is that it's not about letting the other person off the hook, it's about letting yourself off the hook. Getting on, letting go of this. You can't control another human being. You never could, and you never will. Once I understand that, I freed myself up to focus on how I manage me more effectively.
So the key there, letting go.
Yes.
Okay, the fifth happiness trap, thinking that you are nothing without him.
Right.
Make a commitment to yourself without relying on a man to give meaning to your life.
Right. As you know, I worked at Canyon Ranch. And Canyon Ranch demographically caters to the upper 99th percentile socioeconomic. These are people that have a lot of financial resources. Oftentimes, a woman would introduce herself to me, not with her first name or not even her maiden name. Often it was, I'm so-and-so, my husband is a this or that, heads this company, is a surgeon, is a this or that. And I'm thinking, that's their identity, not yours. Tell me who you are, kind of thing. And so while I think it's very important, and we know that people who do have partners tend to be happier people on the whole, both men and women. That's exactly what it is. It's a partnership, it's a we. It's not a absorption of one human being into the identity of another.
Relationships, though, pointing out, are so key for women.
Absolutely.
Communication, relationships are so key, but making sure that you can focus on having your own identity.
You know, Andrea, that's one of the things that came home to me years ago. I was doing a presentation on marriage and relationships on Monterey Bay, one of the most beautiful places I've ever presented. And there are otters behind me and seals in the bay, and it's great. And it was actually a party honoring a woman's 50th birthday. And there was a band after the presentation and a grand buffet, and they had 3 bonfires. So I've spoken for about an hour and a half, and things break off, and everybody goes and listens to the band, and we have a great dinner. And then it's all over, the band stopped playing, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, women are coming around, and they're beginning to talk about some of the points. They want to talk more about it. And I look around, and I've surrounded maybe 20, 25 women. And there's not another guy in the group. I look down the beach, and there are 3 different bonfires. Clustered around those bonfires were every guy in the group, save for me. And they're fire gazing. It's the precursor to television. They're just faced out, mesmerized by the flame.
And the women were attracted to one another.
And the women were attracted. They wanted to talk about things. They wanted to have discussions, maybe debates about it. It was important to them. To the guys, they heard it. Okay, I've got it or I don't got it. I believe it, I don't believe it. Let me go gaze into the fire for a couple hours, you know.
Okay, finally, the 6 happiness traps, circling the career track. I was going to read here just an excerpt from your book.
Okay.
Today's woman is very lucky, or so she had been told. She can absolutely have it all: a glorious career, monetary success, happy children, a caring partner, loyal friends, and an incredibly busy social life. Mm-hmm. We hear about that, but that's not realistic.
No, it isn't. And the idea of having it all, I'm not sure what people mean by that, but I understand what that means to me. And the fact is, if you have it all, Andrea, hang it up. Game over. What's the point in getting up tomorrow? There are no new challenges. There's nothing to stretch you, to grow you, to provide a new sense of excitement. What's over the next vista? How do I learn something new? Do I read something new? You have it all. It's a done deal. And I think it's made women crazy to try to be it all. And the truth is, they try to cram in 28 hours or 32 hours into a 24-hour day. Never works. It's like pouring a half gallon into a quart jar. Something's going to spill.
And you shared a lot of stories here of women who really were prominent in their positions, in their career field, and gave that up for being home, or chose not to have children, or chose not to get married because of really focusing on their career instead, because doing it all, career, romance, and being a good mother is literally impossible. And I think just pointing that out, doing it well, or being at the top of each one of those, can be nearly impossible for women.
I think it is impossible, and I wanted to let women off the hook because, okay, I'm a good mom, but I'm not the senior vice president of my company. Well, you know, there was a great book written in, it's decades on, by Sylvia Hewlett, who was an economist at Columbia, and it's called A Lesser Life, The Myth of Women's Liberation. And she pointed out that when women get pregnant, the first time it sets a career back about 9 months to a year. Second pregnancy, about 2 to 3 years. Third pregnancy, they're never going to catch up with their male counterparts. And you can say that's wrong, and I think things have changed since Sylvia wrote that book to some degree. But the point is, what's really important to you? When you're ready to check out of this grand experience called life, what are you going to say you're grateful about? What's going to be most meaningful and most important to you? And that's how I encourage people to really focus, and women particularly to focus on how they manage themselves, as well as then take that good self, the one that they've built up, they've invested in, they've had that self-interest, and then go to the family, then go to the workplace, go to the community, and bring the best and finest of yourself to the table.
I think that it was good that you pointed out, too, that the second most commonly asked question when people meet is, what do you do? The first, of course, is, what is your name? And that says a lot about who we are in America today.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I want to focus on, I know you've mentioned this before, but how your identity can really be trapped in who you are in your career. If it's not who you are as Mrs. So-and-so, it could be who you are in your career.
You know, this came home when people would lose their jobs, or when the company collapsed, and they would come and sit with me. And while I can't say it was quite as severe as losing a loved one, it was pretty intense, Andrea. And all of a sudden it's like the guts of somebody had just been ripped out of them, if you will. And I'm saying, you know what? That's a lot of value to put in something that is so temporary. Because the truth is that at some point I'm no longer going to write books. At some point you're no longer going to be hosting a television show. What is it that really we want to remember about life? Where is it we've really invested?
And so you focused on in this chapter talking about diversity and balance and making sure that you are not just a career person, a CEO of a company, but you are also a volunteer for this organization, or a mother and a wife, that type of thing.
Absolutely. In other words, it's putting your eggs in several different baskets, if you will. If you put all those eggs in one basket and somehow it's ripped out of your grasp, you're in big trouble.
Well, you featured a lot of different women in your book, sharing specific examples, which I think helped with seeing how your approach. How have women used this approach to change their lives for the better? How have you seen some women's lives changed?
Well, let's talk about Joanne Cacciatore, who's in the book. Joanne is a 40-year-old. About 10 or 12 years ago, she became pregnant and went in for delivery. 10 minutes before the baby was to be born, the heartbeat was quite detectable. By the time Cheyenne was born, there was no heartbeat. Cheyenne was dead. And this sent Joanne into a huge tailspin. In fact, Joanne is actually taking a PhD in human and family development down on the East Campus in Lincoln, although she lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. She sat in her closet, crying unconsolably, rocking back and forth day after day after day. And she had 2 surviving children at that time. And all of a sudden it occurred to her that she needed to do something for Cheyenne. So the very first thing she did, she noticed she had a death certificate for the baby but no birth certificate. So she called the hospital and said, "I want the birth certificate." They said, "Well, your baby was stillborn. It doesn't have a birth certificate." And she said, "But I want one." And they said, "Well, it's not us, it's the legislature." She actually went to the Arizona legislature and got a law passed that every child, whether stillborn or not, gets a birth certificate. And sometimes it's a birth certificate accompanied with a death certificate. But she got involved, and then she started a foundation called MISS, M-I-S-S, Mothers in Support and Sympathy. So now it's no longer just for mothers, but she has something like 71 chapters around the world. She runs this whole thing on less than $100,000 a year. I was telling her she really needs to be the next Fed chief because she can make a dollar stretch better than anybody I've ever seen. But she's touched so many thousands of lives, and this is Cheyenne's legacy that she's living out. So she's taken this terrible, painful tragedy of the loss of a child, and with the spirit of her daughter, has very positively and constructively touched literally tens of thousands of people.
Another point of really that goes throughout your book is attitude is hugely important in how you deal with something and
Yes.
in determining your quality of life. You can choose to be a victim and you can sit there and be that victim, or you can be a victim who does something about it.
Andrea, have you ever known a happy victim?
I don't think they'd be labeled victim if they were.
No, there are people who have certainly suffered immensely at the hands of other people, or at fate, if you will, the events of life. But how they respond to it is so important, because Joanne could have gone into depression and stayed in that closet for years, but she didn't. We have other people. There was a woman who was in a very serious car wreck you read about, who was on the police force in Las Vegas, and a methamphetamine addict who had just been let out of prison.
We just have about 30 seconds left.
Went,
so I
went,
know
on,
you're gonna
went
have
on
to-
a bench. He creamed her. She's totally paralyzed. The physician says you're going to be brain damaged and unable to walk. Not only did she learn to speak again and walk, but she married a physical therapist and she lives a full life.
A good story to end on. Dr. Dan Baker, thank you very much for being with us again. What Happy Women Know. His book is on the store shelves today, and you can pick one up for yourselves. And thank you for watching this edition of Consider This.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.